Welcome everyone to the Kentucky Kid. I am your host, Kelly Berry, and I promise I have not been abducted over the past week, but due to camera availability, haven't been able to get a show to you. But I am back, and you can stop crying on your pillow. One person, though, that's probably not stopped crying on their pillow, especially after they lost for the first time this season, has been Tom Brady. And I cannot tell you how sorry I feel for him. Up until this season, I felt like he was a little bit overrated, that he relied on the dink and dunk, and, he possessed skill in dissecting a defense, but he didn't really possess a lot of skill compared to what everybody said that he was. I thought he was a little overrated. After this season, though, regardless of whether or not I still think he's overrated a tad bit, but regardless of that fact, he won his first 4 games with a roster that seriously looked like a Division II carpetbag team. I mean, it was just pitiful. Like, anytime that Kimbrell Tompkins is anywhere close to leading your team in receptions, you know you have a bad team. And nothing against Kimbrell. He's a fabulous athlete, but his hands are like butter, and he's a slot receiver at best. And any time that you can say that the Cleveland Browns have a better receiving core than you, then your receiving core is by far and away pitiful. They've been without Danny Amendola for, I think, the last week and a half. I think he went out with an injury about halfway through the game 2 weeks ago. But Tom Brady has been begging, and I've been begging too, for Gronkowski to get back because he's on my fantasy team, and right now I'm sucking because my best tight end has not played yet this year. But anyway, enough about my suffering. The Pats' offense has frankly just been terrible. All right, and I'm talking like premiere show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. terrible. I mean, it's just been bad. 1 of 12 on third down. They're averaging a little over 25 minutes of possession a game. 248 total yards in their loss against Cincinnati. Brady went 18 of 38. He broke his streak of 52 straight games with a touchdown. And no, this shaved head has nothing to do with a bet that I had on the Patriots offense or any other offense. I should go ahead and interrupt myself and address this now, okay? The shaved head was simply because I got tired of having mullet-length hair, all right? I'm going to go ahead and put this on air now. I did not lose a bet. I am not a betting man as of now. I haven't developed cancer. I'm not going for the pedophile look. I'm not a fan of... I haven't even watched any Breaking Bad. I didn't shave my head because of that. Okay? Just clearing the water right now. Anyway, beyond that rabbit trail. But the Patriots have been outscored by every single team in the AFC East. And we're not talking about a division that's loaded with offensive talent. If anything, it's the exact opposite, okay? You have Miami, who their best offensive talent is Mike Wallace, and he's clearly not on the same page as Ryan Tannehill, hasn't been all season. The Buffalo Bills, who are an inconsistent team with a free agent now starting quarterback because E.J. Manuel get hurt or something? A porous offensive line, inconsistent receiving core outside of Stevie Johnson. And then you have the Jets, who just have inconsistency spelled all over the butt crack of whatever offensive lineman caused the butt fumble that Mark Sanchez is now famous for. But in saying all of that, the Patriots are a shadow of the team that they once were, okay? The loss of Wes Welker hurt more than I think anyone can ever say. Not having Gronkowski has hurt. But the defense has been pretty good. The defense has been good enough for them to win 4 games. They have been a far cry from a disappointing team. Simply because with all of the injuries that they've had, any team would be lucky to have won any games with this kind of roster. But Tom Brady and Bill Belichick have managed to win 4 out of 5. And they lost on the road in a downpour rain against a Cincinnati team who even with Gronkowski is probably better than the Patriots anyway. The Patriots are not a disappointing team. There have been some disappointing teams in the NFL, though. One team that I hear thrown around a lot that I think a lot of people are missing on is Atlanta. Atlanta's 1-4. That's bad. Okay, they lost at home against the Jets. That's bad. But the reason I don't consider them a disappointing team necessarily is because I wasn't as high on this team as everyone else was. And the reason why is that defense, it's not a porous defense, but there's a saying, and especially in the NFL, and especially on defense, it is so true. You are only as strong as your weakest link. And the weakest link of this defense, I believe, is their pass rush, okay? Because Geno Smith, I watched the last drive against the Falcons, where the game-winning drive where Nick Foles ended up hitting the game-winning field goal. Geno Smith had all sorts of time to throw the ball. And the Jets' offensive line, as we've seen throughout the first 5 weeks of the season, really is not that good. But Geno Smith absolutely victimized this defense because the pass rush is not able to get into the backfield on a consistent basis. And anytime your pass rush fails to get into the backfield, what happens is that puts more pressure on the back seven, your linebackers and your DBs. And it puts more pressure on your defensive coordinator to do one of two things. Either A, he does what he continues to do, send 4 on a pass rush, give your quarterback like 5 seconds to throw the ball, and just get torched throughout the entire game, or put more pressure on your defensive backfield, come with a blitz, hope you get to the quarterback, and if not, you're going to be giving up 20, 30-yard plays every single time. They're not necessarily a disappointing team because, honestly, I think we all overrated them to start the season anyway, and they've lost a lot of close games. A play here, a play there, they're 3-2, 4-1, and nobody's talking about this, okay? But one team that has just been absolutely terrible on every single snap that they have even attempted to play has been the Giants. And up until this week, I really did not think they were the worst team in the NFL. I still think that Jacksonville held that title, and then I thought it was Pittsburgh, and then the Giants. Still thought the Giants were pretty bad. Now, I think they're the worst team in the NFL. And that's saying something considering that Jacksonville is in the NFL. Jacksonville's terrible. But the reason why I put Jacksonville ahead of the Giants is because at least Jacksonville acts like they want to be on the field. At least Jacksonville tries. The Giants look like that one team made up of a bunch of pouty people that nobody wanted to play with in high school because if they did well, they were all in your face about it. Oh yeah, we won a game. And if they lost, they pouted and whined and complained for like the next 17 years. It's like those guys that you go to at your 35th high school reunion who are still whining about that one-on-one game where you beat them in front of their girlfriend or whatever. It's like nobody on the field looks like they want to be on the field. It's like Terrence Jones syndrome back when he was a freshman and early in his sophomore year. It's like absolutely no one appears to want to play the sport of football. Tom Coughlin looks like he is aged 87 years this season. At this point, he could maybe die of a heart attack by the end of the year because he seriously looks so old and so decrepit and so tired of coaching this team. Eli Manning looks like he is running around literally like a chicken with his head cut off because half the time I feel like all 4 defensive all 4 defensive linemen are just going to come and rip his scalp off of his head. He's having to run for his life, and I hear so many people say, oh, Eli Manning's making too many mistakes. If you have the snap and you plant and suddenly there are 3 defensive linemen in your face on every single play, the same thing's going to happen to him that happened to David Carr back when he played for Houston and got sacked 68 times in a season. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to run for his life. He's going to try to do too much. And you can't blame him because the rest of the talent around his team is just awful. So don't fault Eli Manning just because he has a pitiful team filled with players who don't want to be there. The Giants have been outscored by 100 points this year in 5 games. That's the second worst point spread on the season next to Jacksonville. They have 20 turnovers in 4 games. That's more than double the amount of 21 teams in the NFL. And they have the worst turnover ratio at a -13. They're one of 4 winless teams. The other ones are Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, and Tampa Bay. And there are 5 players in the NFL right now who have more sacks than all of the Giants team put together. And the reason why this stat is so alarming is because the Giants have been known for their pass rush. Okay, they have Justin Tuck. A couple of years ago, they had Osi Umenyiora. They have Jason Pierre-Paul. Basically, 3 of their 4 defensive linemen are pass rushing defensive ends by trade. And when your defense is composed of pass rushers and you're not getting any sacks, that shows that your entire defense is going to suffer. Because if your team is built around a pass rush and you're not getting to the quarterback, then you're going to give up big plays, hence the point spread and hence the fact that they're winless and they may not even win a game for the entire season. Another disappointing team, though, and this is an interesting case because I don't think the entire team has been disappointing, is Houston. Houston has this problem. They have a great running back in Arian Foster. They have a great receiving core in Andre Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins. They have a good tight end in Owen Daniels. They have a solid offensive line. They have a good defense. So why are they 2-3? For a long time, I have been a proponent of Matt Schaub. I've said he's not a great quarterback, he's not an elite quarterback, but he's good enough to get the job done. But the 2-3 record so far, and the fact that he's thrown interceptions in the last 7 games, and the last 4 games he's thrown pick sixes, and this offense just looks woeful despite having so many stars. I can no longer defend this guy. Stephen A. Smith of ESPN on First Take said when you look at Matt Schaub, he is beaten, he is demoralized, and he is devoid of confidence. I'm looking at a dude who appears on the verge of being finished, and I think he needs to be benched, and I don't think the team believes they can win with him. Now, I agree. I agree with that summary. The team does not look like they can win with him. When you look at Matt Schaub, when he comes off the field, all right, when you look at an offense that has continuity, you usually see 2 or 3 guys always setting together. Anytime you see Denver's offense on the sideline, which isn't that often, but anytime you see them on the sideline, you see Wes Welker and Peyton Manning sitting together, usually with a coach. Sometimes with like a Demaryius Thomas, a Julius Thomas, and Eric Decker, but those 2 guys are always together. They're always together. If you don't believe me, watch Denver the next time they're on television, and I guarantee you, you are going to see them together on the sideline. Last year, whenever Baltimore was doing well, you saw Joe Flacco and Torrey Smith. Okay, you see Aaron Rodgers with somebody. He's got a plethora of receivers to throw to, so it may be all of them. When you look at Houston on the sideline, it's Matt Schaub sitting by himself. It's Andre Johnson sitting by himself. It's DeAndre Hopkins sitting by himself. Arian Foster's going to get a glass of water. There's no continuity. There's no continuity on this team, especially on the offense. Now, Skip Bayless said, also on First Take, because he and Stephen A. Smith host this show, the team's faith in their quarterback is completely shot. The city's faith in their quarterback is completely shot. It's time to jumpstart this team and let Matt Schaub sit and watch. Now, there is a counter-argument to this. And the counter-argument comes from Yahoo Sports, and I usually am kind of wary, I guess is the correct word, about Yahoo because, I don't know, it's kind of like your second tier, almost your diet sports coverage. But in this case, I think I agree with what they say anyway. It said you can't give half the solution to the problem. So don't say bench Matt Schaub unless you think that the Texans are really better off with TJ Yates. Spoiler alert, they're not. Now, a counter argument also comes from Skip Bayless. Case Keenum, I believe if you threw him into the system right... God.
You like this? You like this, Kelly?
Now is the halftime performance from my gloriously, nearly nude, and utterly terrifying roommate.
Oh, we're still going?
I think it'd be funny if he just kept going.
Oh, okay.
I guess he won't.
Well, now that my daily dose of lap dance is over, Case Keenum provides a solid backup solution. The stats on Matt Schaub, though, they just don't lie, okay? I mean, it's kind of like watching a belly dance from a roommate, all right? It's just not something that's good to watch. You have 7 straight games with an interception. You have 4 straight games with a pick six. Your consensus AFC South winning team is 2-3, despite having all kinds of tools and really no injury issues. You've thrown under 55% completions in 2 of 5 games this year. You've only thrown over 300 yards twice. And you have the 6th lowest quarterback rating of any currently starting quarterback in the NFL. Now, I'm not saying that Houston should just scrap Matt Schaub. I do think, though, that they should bench him. All right, they should bench him. And it's not so much about another guy being better, it's about your guy progressively getting worse. And when a quarterback loses confidence, and this is something that Skip Bayless said as well, when a quarterback loses confidence, it's just a downhill slope. He's going to lose more and more confidence. So you have to set him, you have to let him regain his thoughts. Put in Case Keenum, see if he's the quarterback of the future. If not, bring back Matt Schaub. If that doesn't work, maybe plug in TJ Yates. And if that doesn't work, right out the rest of the season, draft a quarterback. Long term, though, I just don't think Schaub is the solution. This team is too good, too talented, not to be winning games right now. While that is the disappointing aspect of the NFL this season, the disappointing teams, there have been some teams that have been good and better than expected. And I think you have to point to the Saints as being probably the best of those. We all knew coming into the season that this offense was going to be good. All right, Drew Brees has been solid. Jimmy Graham is having a phenomenal season. Okay? Jimmy Graham, first in receiving yards, first in first down catches, second in touchdowns, third in 20-plus yard plays, and first among active tight ends in yards per catch. I mean, this guy is an absolutely phenomenal athlete. But it's been the defense that's won them some games. I mean, Tampa Bay, their offense struggled. The defense held them to 14 points. And Tampa Bay has been the only opponent that scored more on the Saints than their season average. They held Atlanta under their season average, and they have held every other opponent outside of the Buccaneers under their season average in points. They've been so good. Mix their success this year with the fact that Seattle can't do squat on the road. I've referenced scoring 12 against the Carolina defense that's pitiful, and losing a 12-point lead and ultimately losing the game against Indianapolis as examples. The Saints are the best team in the NFC right now. And frankly, I don't think it's that close. Another team that's been good, and even though I said that they were going to win the Super Bowl this year, they've been better than I expected, Denver Broncos. By far and away, not even close, best team in the country, hands down. Their offense is averaging 46 points per game, all right? Let's put this in perspective for just a second. That's more than twice as many points per game as any other team in the NFL. They're on pace to break the... Let me try that again. They're on pace to break the scoring record set by the New England Patriots back in 2007 in 13 games. And the defense has not been that great. I mean, they gave up 48 points to the Cowboys. But they've been without their two best defenders in Von Miller and Champ Bailey all season long. They've been by far and away the best team. New Orleans is the second best team. Seattle's probably the third best team. And then for the three worst, the Giants, I just think they're absolutely abysmal. I don't need to get on that soapbox again. Jacksonville is terrible, probably the least talented team in the NFL. I would still take them in a head-to-head against the Giants because they just honestly are crap this year. And then Pittsburgh, who's old and decrepit, and half the defense is probably going to be on crutches in the next 5 years. It's just bad. All right. But as far as the playoffs are concerned, and I know we're only 5 weeks in and it's way too early to be predicting the playoffs, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway because I'm like that. In the AFC, Denver's number one, not even close. Still my Super Bowl favorite, hands down. Then New England with number two. I think by the time they get back Amendola, they get back Gronkowski, they develop some continuity with these young receivers. The defense has been good enough to win them games this year. I think they're going to be the second best team in the AFC long term. Indianapolis, the addition of Trent Richardson, I don't understand what the deal is, everybody thinking that Richardson is bad. Okay, statistically he hasn't been that great, but come on. He's been dealing with 9-man fronts in Cleveland his entire career, and he's still getting used to actually having holes to run through. That acquisition was great. It takes some pressure off of Andrew Luck and company, and that is a phenomenal offense. And outside of Denver is probably the second best offense in the country. They're the third best team. Cincinnati's the fourth best team. And then the wild cards, Kansas City and Miami. Which Kansas City is probably the second best team in the AFC, but because of the way the playoffs are set up, it's not so much about record as whether or not you're the best team in your division and then record. So they're number 5, Miami's number 6. I guess an outlier could be like a Tennessee. You could throw in a Baltimore there, though I think their offense is just way too inconsistent to get there. I'm not big on Cleveland, even though they're 3-2. They've won their last 3 games. Come on, though. It's not been against the greatest of competition, folks. They got Cincinnati on a bad day. They have Buffalo at home. It's better than what I expected them to be, but still. I'm not putting that much weight into it. Then the NFC, New Orleans, I've already said they're the best team in the NFC. Seattle at number 2. Green Bay at number 3. And here's the thing. They've had a brutal, brutal start to the season. They've had a lot of tough games. And you can say, well, how can you put them as the third best team in the NFC when they're the third best record in their own division? Chicago's not as good as their record indicates. Okay, Jay Cutler is still the inconsistent Jay Cutler of old. We've seen that over the last 2 weeks. And then Detroit's offense is great. It's phenomenal. But the defense is still porous. So by the end of the season, you're probably going to see Green Bay as number 3. Then Philadelphia in a wide open NFC East race. And the reason why I put them there, Dallas on paper has the best team. That was emphasized by the fact that they nearly beat Denver. The reason I don't put Dallas as winning the NFC East, or even in the playoffs for that matter, is because Dallas is one of those teams that does really well against good teams and really bad against bad teams. They're a team that's going to play up to better competition and play down to worse competition. It's just how it's been. So New Orleans, Seattle, Green Bay, Philadelphia, wild card San Francisco, who is a much better team than they have shown, and finally Detroit, who's probably a dark horse at this point. But speaking of playoffs, Major League playoffs, baseball, full swing. And I am usually ripping myself for how notoriously terrible I am at predicting stuff. Case in point, today I predicted I would not get a belly dance, and look what happened. But last night, I called every single game right. Now, granted, there were only 4. But I called the A's to beat the Tigers. It happened. I called the Rays to beat the Red Sox and to extend the series. It happened. I called the Dodgers to end their series with the Braves. That happened. And I called a first start in Michael Wacha beating Pittsburgh in PNC Park, and it happened. Test my luck again over the next 2 days. I'm going to say the Tigers beat the A's tonight. Okay, Detroit is way too good of a team to lose 2 games at home, especially an elimination game. Do I think they win the series? No. But I do think they push it to 5, force it back to Oakland, and then the A's plaster the Tigers in Game 5. So the Tigers beat the A's tonight. And the other game tonight, I think the Red Sox beat the Rays. And right now, the Rays have been that miracle team that I think deep down everyone wants to see them succeed, them and the Pirates, for 2 different reasons. The Pirates, this is their first playoff in 21 years, 1992, 2013, yeah. But the Rays, they won the wild card game to get to the wild card game. Then they won the official wild card game, and now they've won their first elimination game against Boston. But I think all good things must come to an end, and tonight this kind of feels right. It kind of feels right for Boston to say, all right, enough's enough. We're the best team in the baseball world right now. This is over. It just feels like one of those things that's going to happen. Then tomorrow night, just one game because, as you know, the Dodgers and the Braves series is already over. The Cardinals beat the Pirates. So I'm picking basically both miraculous seasons to end. It's been a miraculous season so far for the Pirates. It has been. It's been fun to watch, and this is coming from a Reds fan. Okay, I should hate the Pirates deep down, but I don't, because they're a fun team to watch. They're a likable team to watch. It's been good, though, that they've been good. And I think this is where baseball is starting to gain some new fans, with teams that usually aren't that great, like a Pittsburgh, like a Tampa Bay. Kansas City nearly got into the playoffs. Baltimore nearly got into the playoffs. That's where you're going to see baseball regain some of its popularity that it's lost. With these smaller markets, Cincinnati's another one I can think of, that aren't historically good, but are good for a couple of seasons and then fade out for a new team to come in. So as far as the American League Championship Series is concerned, what I have is the A's against the Red Sox and the Cardinals against the Dodgers. Speaking of postseason predictions, on to college football, right? And I have mentioned, and I'm not sure if I mentioned it on this show or not, but I mentioned it in passing with conversation of fellow sports lovers. I believe that U of L is the second best team in the country. But they're not going to be recognized as the second best team in the country because their strength of schedule is just ridiculously non-existent. Okay, they're basically loaded with playing cupcake teams that, if anything, shouldn't even be in Division 1. It's not going to be a bad season, though, for Louisville. They're not going to get into the BCS championship game because they're already being jumped by one-loss teams. They've already been jumped by Georgia, and it's probably going to happen again pretty soon. All right, teams in the top 10, I mean, they're already behind two ACC teams in Clemson and Florida State. They're already behind two Pac-12 teams in Oregon and Stanford. They're behind Ohio State, and Ohio State's got an easy schedule, an easy walk-in into whatever ranking they end up with. I mean, there's nobody in the Big Ten that's really that good outside of Wisconsin. You can throw in Michigan. Michigan's been a joke. But Louisville's not going to get into the championship game. They'll get into a BCS Bowl because the American Athletic Conference still has an automatic bid for some reason. But as of now, it's looking like Sugar Bowl, maybe Orange Bowl. Fiesta might be a stretch. That's probably going to be where they're going to end up. But again, it's not going to be a bad season for them. They're going to end up in a BCS Bowl of some kind. It's not going to be the championship game, but they're going to end up in a BCS Bowl. They could win another BCS Bowl. I mean, they beat Florida last year. And Teddy Bridgewater could win the Heisman. I mean, he's thrown for over 1,500 yards, only has one interception compared to 16 touchdowns. I mean, he's having a phenomenal season. So it's not going to be a bad season for them, but it's not going to be a championship season for them, at least in the national context. Another team, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Western Kentucky is going to win the Sun Belt. Okay, and the reason why is because Bobby Petrino has finally figured out that he is coaching a power-running team. And he is coaching one of the most underrated, if not the most underrated, tailback in the universe. But Brandon Doughty is finally settled in, all right? And what I talked about with Matt Schaub's temporary benching has kind of worked with Western Kentucky. In their game, I can't remember now, I think it was Navy that they did this. It may have even been the game before that. But where they tried having 4 quarterbacks, and Doughty, I think, only threw like 7 passes or something like that. That worked. It allowed him to settle down. And he looked settled down against Louisiana Monroe. And this was a big game for a couple of reasons, all right? Number one, Doughty finally looked like a starting quarterback. All right? He threw for 370 yards and 2 touchdowns. That was big. The fact that they went into Louisiana Monroe, who was picked to win the Sun Belt this year. And they beat them 31-10 on the road, that's big. The fact that Antonio Andrews in the last 3 games has 550 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns is big. Their next game, though, Western Kentucky's next game is going to be really, really telling. They're at home against the team that was picked to finish second in the Sun Belt. That's Louisiana Lafayette. And the reason this game will be telling, Louisiana Lafayette's probably going to be favored to win. If not, it's going to be pretty close. I have Western Kentucky winning that game, personally, but I'm a little biased. But this game is going to be huge. Huge for Western because they've already lost a game in conference against South Alabama. And if they lose this one, it's going to be really, really difficult for them to get into the Sun Belt Conference Championship game. It's not going to be impossible, but it's going to be tough when you already have 2 conference losses in your first 3 games. And then finally, the worst team in the state of Kentucky, but probably the most improved team in the state of Kentucky from a season ago, the University of Kentucky. And look, I'm a Kentucky fan, and I'm going to go ahead and admit this now. I was not optimistic about this season at all. I said the best case scenario, we win maybe 3 games. I predicted 2, but I said best case scenario, we win 3, and we don't get beat by a spread of 100 points at least against this 4-game stretch of Louisville, Florida, South Carolina, and Alabama. The Alabama game's coming up this Saturday, and I am terrified out of my mind what the Crimson Tide could do to the Cats. It's probably going to be ugly. But I'm going to watch the game like a trooper unless I get sick halfway through and just realize I can't take it anymore. But for any reasonable Kentucky fan, they didn't expect a bowl game. They didn't expect a winning season. They didn't, I don't even think anybody should have expected any more than 2 wins. What you hope to see is improvement each game. And we've seen that. We've seen facets of this team getting better week in, week out. That first game against Western was terrible. But this team now looks completely different from a team a few weeks ago when they faced the Hilltoppers in Nashville. Case in point, they almost beat South Carolina on the road. And you look at improvement from common opponents from a season ago. All right, Louisville. Last year, they lost by 18. This year, they lost by 14. And that 18 number is a little deceptive because, frankly, Louisville last year just ran the ball the entire second half. And it was Teddy Bridgewater's first start. I take that back, he didn't even start. We injured their starting quarterback, whatever his name is. I think it was like Stein or something. And he came in, and then we all realized, oh my God, he's really good. Florida a year ago, lost by 38. This year only lost by 17. South Carolina last year, they lost by 21. This year they lost by 7. All right, what we're seeing from this team is exactly what I wanted to see. A bunch of young guys improving week by week, game by game, and sometimes even play by play. But as far as the country is concerned, much like the NFL, there are some very, very overrated and very, very underrated teams in the country. And I'm going to start with overrated because I'm a negative, cynical guy who likes to do that sort of thing. And the third most overrated team in the country right now, you could argue that they're higher than that, but I'm going to put them at number 3, is Texas A&M. And the reason why is this defense seriously believes they are playing touch football. It's like, oh, we put 2 hands on you, you're done. They can't wrap up. They are physically incapable, for whatever reason, of surrounding a player with their arms and bringing them to the ground. It's pitiful. It's the worst style of defense I have ever seen since I called football games last year for 3A high school in the state of Kentucky and literally saw guys trying to tackle each other with their shoulder pads. It's pitiful. You're a D1 freaking college athlete, wrap up a guy, and throw him to the ground. Oklahoma is my second most overrated team. And the reason why is because I realize it's a down year in college, and really being a top 10 team is not as glamorous as it used to be. Oklahoma is not a top 10 team. That offense, I still have a lot of questions about them, and it starts with Blake Bell. Now, he's obviously improved the numbers of the offense, and he's probably a better quarterback option. But I still am not convinced on him being a long-term starting D1 college quarterback simply because he hasn't played anybody, really. I mean, against TCU, they barely won, and TCU's they're not a bad defense, but they're not that great defense that we've seen out of the Horned Frogs in the past. But my most overrated team has got to be Clemson. All right, because again, I realize it's a down year. There's no reason why this team is the third best team in the country. There's no reason why that should be the case. And the reason why is because they're not even the best team in their own conference. I'll get to that later. But the third best team in the country is supposed to legitimately challenge as an outsider looking in for the championship. Okay, that's what it's supposed to be. They're supposed to be like that slight underdog to get in. But they're not. Okay, because Clemson always has that one game every year where you just scratch your head and wonder what the hell are they doing. And this year it was North Carolina State. All right, granted they won the game. Barely. But they did win the game. But when you're not even the best team in your own conference, there's no reason why you're the third best team in the country. There's no excuse for that. Unless it's a situation where it's Alabama and LSU and it's clearly just the two best teams in the country. All right, I mentioned Clemson being an overrated team. Florida State, who is the best team in the ACC, who I believe will win the ACC this year, and challenge as an outsider looking in for the BCS championship game, is Florida State. And I'm not saying they're the second best team in the country, because that title will probably fall to Oregon. What I am saying, though, is that they have the tools that it takes to challenge in Alabama for a title game. What you need to win a title game is you need a good quarterback, and they have one in James Winston, who is definitely a Heisman contender, if not a front runner. They have a great offensive line, a sound running game, and a great defense that can fly around and also make tackles. Texas A&M, take a lesson. They have all ingredients needed to win in this day and age. And they are, in my mind, and it's frankly not that close, the best team in their conference. Another team, keep it in the ACC. Another team that's very underrated in my mind, Miami. All right? And they're kind of that team that wins, but it seems like no matter how many games they win, they're just always going to fly under the radar. Whenever they beat Florida, we were all like, oh, well, Florida's got a pitiful offense. When they beat Georgia Tech, nobody really paid any attention to it. Listen, you have to pay attention to this team. They're not going to be a BCS team. All right? I just don't think that's the case. But they've got a great scoring defense, all right? They don't give up that many points, just 16 a game. And they have one of the best scoring offenses in the country at 45.2, all right? They're averaging beating teams by nearly 30 points a game. But the most underrated team, and I've said this before on this show, and I've said it before in conversation, and one of these days, people are going to listen to me when I say that the UCLA Bruins are a legitimate BCS contender. And are the second best team at least in their conference. They're not the best team, but they're the most complete team. All right? They have the fifth best scoring offense at 48 points a game. They have a great balanced attack. They're averaging 302 yards passing. They're averaging 260 yards a game rushing. And what that does is it keeps defenses honest, and you can't key in on one thing. All right, Brett Hundley, great dual threat quarterback. They have a great running back in Jordan James. And let me go back to Brett Hundley for a second. I don't know how many people have done this. I didn't have the time to look this up. But he had, in that game against Utah, which they barely won, he had a passing touchdown, a rushing touchdown, and a receiving touchdown. That doesn't happen that often. But as far as my BCS predictions are concerned, I'm going to test the waters here and predict one more thing on this show today. BCS predictions, okay? Start with the game that everybody cares about, the championship game, Alabama and Oregon. Right now, it's really hard to make a case that anybody else deserves to be in this game ahead of them too. I've heard people try and make a case for Ohio State. I'm not buying it. I think Ohio State has benefited from a weak schedule. I don't think the defense is as good as everybody says they are. I don't think Braxton Miller is as great as everybody says he is. And Oregon, frankly, is just better. And we all know how good Alabama is. I mean, with all they lost, they're still like, it doesn't really feel like they've missed a beat, really. Fiesta Bowl, Baylor, I have them winning the Pac-12. Oh, I'm sorry, the Rose Bowl. The Rose Bowl, my bad. My bad. Hang on a second. Rose Bowl, Baylor, Ohio State. All right, it's a classic Big Ten, Pac-12 matchup that I think will be a very, very good game to watch. Baylor's got a very good offense. Ohio State's got a very good offense. If those two teams matched up and played each other, at least 80 combined points, probably more. Sugar Bowl, Georgia against Fresno State. And Fresno State is here based on the technicality that nobody else really deserves to be here. And you might say Stanford. The reason I don't say Stanford is because I believe the rule is still intact that at most you can only have 2 teams from the same conference in a BCS Bowl. So, you would already have Oregon and you would already have UCLA. So Stanford, sorry. But anyway, Georgia and Fresno State. Then in the Fiesta Bowl, because for some reason I had Baylor written in this one too, and they're not good enough to play in 2 different BCS Bowls, it would be Louisville and Clemson. And that would be another very intriguing game to watch. And the reason why is because, Louisville, I've been very high on them. Maybe I'm biased because I'm a Kentucky guy. And, I don't hate Louisville like a bunch of Kentucky fans do. And then Clemson, though I think they're overrated. They have a talented team. Taj Boyd's a very good quarterback. They've got a good running game. They've got a decent defense. It's not the sexiest thing to watch in the world, but it's okay. But who knows? I mean, it's still very, very early in the season. I could have messed this up like a lot of people thought I messed up with the buzzed head. I'm not that great at predicting games, so who knows? But hopefully we can refrain from me making an idiot of myself like I did with those ghastly NFL predictions. And hopefully we can refrain from any more belly dances from college roommates. But until next time, hopefully the camera will be more available because I'm really, really trying to get 2 shows a week. I think I definitely have enough material for that. There's definitely enough going on, especially now with 3 big sports. You have baseball and you have college and professional football in full swing. There's definitely enough going on and that you all deserve to have 2 shows a week, but hopefully we can make that happen. But until next time, I will see you. Thanks for joining me here today.